To this now, a court has dismissed an application by former President Jacob Zuma, who wanted to appeal a prior ruling on legal fees. This is after he was ordered to pay nearly 29 million rand spent by the state on his legal fees. Well, let's talk now to legal analyst Melusi Xulu, who talks to us more about this particular turn of events. Good evening to you, Mr. Xulu, and thank you very much, as always, for your time. A precedent-setting case, do you think, or do you believe this to be?
Good evening to you, Pauline, to the viewer at home. Thank you for having me. Yes, it is indeed a precedent-setting case because we've never had it happening before. But at the end of the day, I believe it's the courts applying the law the way they believe it should be applied as plainly as possible, meaning if you're working for the state, what the courts are saying is the legal fees that you have to pay should not be paid by the state if it's a personal matter. I think that is the logic behind it, if I can explain it as simple as I can, the way the courts are trying to state it.
Yeah. President Zuma would have put up a fight to say that this is possibly unfair because he would not have been the one to have made this decision in the first place, that the state pays for his legal fees. Would that have been a fair argument from him, given that the decision maker must sit somewhere in government?
Yes, I believe what the judge said today with regards to empathy and constitutional sensitivity said that there's an argument that should have been made way before, not just now, because at the end of the day, the order has been made that he is responsible, and the defenses that he's raising, I believe this was not the time for him to raise them. But obviously, Goli, he still has an option to proceed with the appeal because it was denied by Judge Miller. It doesn't mean he doesn't have that option, but he believes, the judge believes that, there's no other court that will come to a different conclusion on this matter.
The former president, as you say, he has an option, and presumably that would now be the Constitutional Court. And knowing or having seen the former president and the litigious person he is, possibly this is where this is headed now. However, there is the question about whether or not he is able to pay back, because the former president has in the past pleaded poverty. So if he loses at the Concord, what is the logical conclusion here? A touching of assets?
Yes, obviously they will attach assets that belong to him. It could be movable assets, it could be immovable assets, or to a certain extent it could be his pension. I know that there is some sensitivity on that, because at the end of the day, he must still be able to, live as an elderly person as well. But obviously, if you apply the law in terms of monies that are being owed, that sympathy is not necessarily something that must be applied. The law will apply. But something that I'm very interested in, Koli, I think when it comes to properties in our province in KZN that belong or under the Ingonyama Trust, that becomes a quite interesting part to look at, whether if it's under Ingonyama Trust, will the sheriff be able to attach that? I think that will be an interesting legal conundrum to look at, but we'll cross the bridge when we get there.
Yeah. We began the conversation by dealing first with whether or not this was a precedent-setting case. You've responded in the affirmative. Let's conclude the conversation on that score. There are many instances in government where people do wrong, and I think I've heard this argument being placed on a platform before, that no one actually sends a government official to do wrong on behalf of the state, and therefore it's never made sense why people would then require the state to pay for their legal fees simply on the basis that at the time of the commission of the crime, they were in the employ of the state. Do you believe that that loophole has now essentially closed?
I believe it has been clarified, Toli, because let us make an example of where you are under an employ of a government institution and you are carrying out the duties under that institution and possibly whether it's civil, in a civil manner or case, and you are probably carrying out those duties, that could be understood where you could say, I was just carrying out the duties under this particular department. But when it's a criminal matter, to put it plainly, and maybe it's a fraud case, for example, if that particular matter is applicable to you as an accused, then it should not make sense that that money should be paid by the state. That's the simplest way of explaining it. But for example, if I'll be just express more if I for a second. For example, if you've committed a crime of assault whilst you are being employed by the state, you can't say the state must pay for your fees because whilst that assault was done internally, you were working for the state. So that's how I think the logic is being done or being explained in these cases. Where you have a case, you must attend to it. If it's personal, you must pay for it.
Legal analyst Melusi Xulu, thank you very much for your time and clarity tonight. Thanks indeed.